Now, for the first time, we have actual footage to analyze. What makes this footage unlike anything ever recorded?
In the quiet hills of Wiltshire, something happened that defied logic, science, and everything we thought we knew about the natural world. Captured on camera, recorded by instruments, and witnessed by experts, a massive crop formation appeared in just 15 seconds, without a sound, without warning.
Damage identical to what botanist William Levengood had documented in previous formations and attributed to microwave exposure. The stalks weren't broken, but gently bent at the nodes, as if rapidly heated and then cooled in their new position.
But this wasn't just another strange pattern in the fields. What followed challenged the very fabric of physics, biology, and reality itself. Was it a message? A warning? Or evidence of a technology far beyond human reach? What you're about to discover may reshape your understanding of what's truly possible. On a cold January night, a team of researchers from various institutions had set up observation equipment across a field in response to local reports of strange lights. It wasn't the first time the area had seen unusual activity, but what happened that night was unlike anything previously documented. The team wasn't there to investigate aliens or paranormal activity. Their objective was to monitor electromagnetic anomalies and natural phenomena in the landscape. The setup included thermal imaging drones, electromagnetic field detectors, high-speed cameras, magnetometers, and spectrum analyzers. At precisely 3:13 a.m., several cameras captured a glowing orb, roughly the size of a basketball, hovering above the field. It made no sound, emitted no beam of light, and appeared to move with slow, purposeful motion across the area. As it passed over the barley field, something remarkable began to happen. The crops beneath the orb began to flatten. Not chaotically, but in clear, geometric shapes. In just 15 seconds, an enormous and intricate crop formation had appeared. Multiple cameras, recording from different angles, confirmed the timeline and pattern of events. This was not a case of someone sneaking into the field at night and stamping down crops. The footage was reviewed by independent video analysts who found no signs of tampering or visual trickery. The orb itself appeared to operate in complete silence. Even as the crops shifted, there was no sound of snapping stalks or rustling leaves. One of the researchers on site later described the atmosphere as deeply unsettling, not because of fear, but because of the absolute stillness. No wind, no wildlife, just a silent event that defied their understanding. What made this incident different from previous crop circle sightings wasn't just the eyewitness accounts. It was the data. The equipment installed throughout the area captured real-time electromagnetic spikes during the event. Instruments recorded activity across multiple frequencies, including high-frequency bursts in the hundreds of megahertz. Magnetometers registered sharp deviations, with some readings going completely off-scale. Infrasound detectors picked up a low-frequency vibration at around 5.2 Hz in the moments just before the crops began to move. The synchronization of these data points, aligned precisely with the visual footage, gave the event a scientific footprint that had never been seen before in the study of crop formations. As soon as the formation appeared, the research team entered the field. They weren't expecting the phenomenon to continue, but they were eager to examine the physical changes to the plants. What they found was hard to explain. The barley stalks were not broken or crushed. Instead, they were neatly bent at roughly 90-degree angles, just an inch above the soil. It was as though the plants had been softened, rearranged, and left to harden again, all within a few seconds. Surveyors used laser measurements to map the formation and confirmed that the circles were nearly perfect, accurate to within half an inch over spans exceeding 100 feet. The straight lines connecting various circles were equally precise, even though they crossed uneven terrain. Drone footage taken with thermal imaging cameras showed temperature variations in the pattern. These weren't random heat signatures, but were directly aligned with the newly formed shapes. This suggested that energy of some kind had interacted with the crops during or immediately after their alteration. Further complicating the matter, electronic equipment began to malfunction within the formation. Fresh batteries were found to be completely drained. Compasses refused to settle on north, spinning without clear orientation. Some drones experienced magnetic interference, while mobile phones either lost signal entirely or connected in erratic patterns. One researcher's watch stopped exactly at 3:13 a.m. and wouldn't restart until it was taken several hundred meters away from the field. The glowing orb, central to the formation's creation, was analyzed frame by frame in the video. It showed smooth, deliberate movement, almost as though scanning the field. Yet, there was no visible link between the orb and the crops. No lasers, no sound, no physical contact. The plant bending appeared to respond to the orb's position, but the exact mechanism remains unclear. The timing of each geometric segment forming lined up with spikes in electromagnetic activity, giving further weight to the idea that a directed energy source may have been involved. However, no known technology is capable of bending plants in this way, at this speed, and with such precision, especially without leaving behind scorch marks or noise. The scientific community, typically cautious when it comes to claims of the unexplained, took a noticeable interest in the incident. Michael Barr, a physicist from ETH Zurich, was part of the observation team, and later described the event as outside the known limits of our current scientific models. He pointed out that while electromagnetic energy can interact with physical materials in interesting ways, the coordination and selectivity shown here was completely unexpected. It's important to note that the crop formation wasn't just aesthetically impressive. It featured complex geometry, including interlocking circles, spiral designs, and straight lines forming an interconnected grid. Early mathematical analysis showed that the ratios between different sections aligned with established mathematical principles, but the main focus, initially, was on how such a formation could be created physically, without machinery or human intervention, and in such a short time frame. Local media initially treated the story with the usual mix of intrigue and humor. Crop circles had always been a quirky side story in rural England, often lumped in with tales of UFO sightings and ghost encounters. But as the scientific data emerged, the tone began to shift. News outlets were unable to dismiss the footage and data outright. There was simply too much corroboration from different instruments and sources. It wasn't a rumor or blurry footage. It was a coordinated, multi-sensor capture of an unexplained event. One of the earliest signs that this wasn't a typical hoax was the lack of physical disturbance to the surrounding field. There were no footprints, no vehicle tracks, and no signs of human entry. Even experienced crop circle investigators noted that the structure and precision of the formation went far beyond known hoaxes, which typically show signs of human error upon closer inspection. This pattern had none. It was precise, symmetrical, and showed no damage consistent with mechanical tools. In the days that followed, the field became the site of ongoing investigations. Soil samples were collected, plant tissue was sent to laboratories. The formation remained visible for weeks, yet no further disturbances occurred. Visitors to the field reported strange sensations, tingling, dizziness, or even calmness, though such accounts remained subjective and hard to verify. At this stage, researchers remained cautious. Theories ranged from undiscovered natural phenomena to experimental technologies operating outside public knowledge. Still, none of the data matched conventional explanations like weather patterns, fungal growth, or animal activity. The alignment between sensor data, camera footage, and physical plant changes pointed to something unique. The January 2025 Wiltshire event marked a turning point in how crop formations were viewed. For the first time, a complete data set of video footage, electromagnetic readings, thermal imagery, and in-person observation was available for scientific scrutiny. The evidence didn't offer easy answers, but it did present a challenge to explain something that, so far, lies beyond our current tools and theories. Whether the event was the result of unknown technology, natural forces we don't yet understand, or something else entirely, one fact remains clear. It happened, and it left behind more questions than answers. Following the initial shock and widespread attention that the Wiltshire event received, scientists across multiple disciplines began diving deeper into the data. The more they analyzed the findings, the more they encountered details that simply didn't align with existing scientific frameworks. It quickly became evident that what had occurred in that barley field wasn't just visually impressive, it had left behind a series of physical, biological, and electromagnetic signatures that were deeply puzzling. One of the first aspects researchers focused on was the condition of the plants inside the formation. At first glance, the barley appeared undamaged, bent neatly into symmetrical patterns without being crushed. Upon closer inspection, however, specialists noticed something highly unusual. The stalks weren't broken in the way that plants typically are when manually flattened. Instead, they were bent at almost perfect 90-degree angles, just above the soil. The nodes, those knuckle-like sections on the stem, had visibly expanded and elongated. These changes were not found in the control samples from outside the formation. Plant biologist Dr. Leslie Keene was among the first to conduct a detailed cellular analysis of the affected barley. Her team discovered that the cell walls within the bent stems had been softened in a way that made them flexible without breaking. This kind of controlled softening is not something that naturally occurs in cold winter conditions, particularly in mature barley. More curiously, the inner structure of the stems showed evidence of rapid internal heating. Microscopic imaging revealed that the lignon, a tough organic polymer found in plant cell walls, had briefly lost its rigidity, making the stems pliable just long enough to bend before hardening again in place. The source of this heating was not mechanical. Thermal imagery taken during the event indicated temperature changes in the field, but these didn't show any external source of heat, such as a flame, beam, or visible radiation. The pattern of heating also didn't spread evenly. Only certain plants, specifically those within the formation's design, were affected. Plants standing directly next to them, even within inches, showed no signs of alteration. This selective effect was among the most baffling findings. It suggested that some form of targeted energy, capable of affecting individual stalks while ignoring others, had been used. Microwave energy soon became a focal point of investigation. Certain types of microwave exposure can soften plant tissues in lab conditions, and the cellular changes observed in the Wiltshire plants closely resembled those results. Yet, the application in this case would have required an energy source capable of producing extremely precise bursts, modulated in both intensity and duration, to target specific points on thousands of individual plants. Furthermore, this energy would need to have been distributed across an entire field in under 20 seconds without leaving behind any damage typically associated with high-intensity microwaves, such as scorching or desiccation. No known portable technology is currently capable of performing this task. Physicists were equally stumped by the readings from the equipment placed around the formation. Electromagnetic sensors recorded intense bursts across multiple frequencies at the exact moments corresponding with each section of the pattern forming. These bursts didn't match any known natural phenomena. In particular, spectrum analyzers showed brief, high-frequency spikes in the hundreds of megahertz range, far above what would be expected from any environmental noise. Simultaneously, magnetometers went into overload, some registering values so high they exceeded the device's calibrated maximums. These anomalies were not present before or after the event, only during the brief window when the formation was created. Infrasound detectors also picked up unusual signals. In the seconds leading up to the formation's appearance, a low-frequency hum around 5.2 Hz was recorded. This frequency sits near the threshold of human hearing, but is known to have measurable effects on physical structures and biological organisms. Some researchers hypothesized that this vibration may have played a role in altering the physical properties of the plants, either by loosening their internal structure or facilitating the absorption of other forms of energy. While still speculative, this idea aligned with earlier research into how infrasound can influence biological systems. The electromagnetic effects didn't end with the formation's creation. Investigators returning to the site in the days and weeks afterward continued to register irregularities. Compasses brought into the formation would spin erratically when moved across certain parts of the pattern, particularly along intersecting lines and central points. These weren't subtle variations. In some cases, the compass needle would rotate continuously without settling. Mobile phones operated unpredictably, losing signal in some spots and then suddenly regaining full strength in others, sometimes within just a few steps. Digital cameras also behaved strangely, occasionally capturing light flares and distortions that weren't visible to the naked eye. Drones flown over the formation encountered unexpected issues. Some experienced minor navigational glitches, while others logged magnetic interference that affected their internal gyroscopic systems. This suggested that the area still retained some form of residual electromagnetic charge, even days after the initial event. The consistency of these anomalies pointed to a lingering energy field rather than a short-lived burst. Electrical engineers, brought in to study the effect, proposed that the entire formation functioned like a giant passive circuit, with energy flowing through the pattern in a structured way. When mapped, these flows followed paths that mirrored the geometric design itself, implying a kind of purposeful organization behind the lingering field effects. The idea of energy flowing through a physical pattern like a circuit led to even more fascinating observations. Using time-lapse imaging and electromagnetic sensors, researchers discovered that the formation exhibited a very faint but consistent pulse. This pulse had a cycle of about 5.2 hours, matching the infrasound frequency recorded during the formation's creation. It wasn't strong enough to power devices or register on consumer electronics, but sensitive scientific instruments picked up the fluctuations. The pulse also appeared to affect seeds placed within the pattern. Seeds located at points where the energy flow peaked would germinate faster and with greater vitality than those placed in other areas. Controlled germination experiments offered further surprises. Seeds collected from inside the formation sprouted 40% faster than control seeds taken from unaffected parts of the same field. Not only that, but the plants that grew from these seeds showed improved resistance to drought and common plant diseases. They appeared healthier overall, even when exposed to stress conditions in laboratory environments. Microscopic examination of these second-generation plants showed a higher density of chloroplasts and more efficient mitochondrial activity, indicators of enhanced photosynthesis and cellular energy production. The biological anomalies extended beyond the plants. Insect samples taken from within the formation showed significant differences compared to those from nearby areas. Bees collected at the site displayed altered navigation behavior and reduced susceptibility to common parasites. Beetles exhibited changes in feeding patterns, and even soil bacteria showed improved nitrogen-fixing efficiency, which could have long-term benefits for soil fertility. These changes weren't the result of contamination or random mutation. Genetic sequencing revealed subtle but consistent shifts in gene expression patterns. Specifically, alterations in DNA methylation. These epigenetic changes influence how genes are turned on or off, And in this case, the alterations were not random. They targeted genes associated with growth, repair, and stress response. Dr. Michael Barr, a molecular biologist from ETH Zurich, found these results deeply troubling and fascinating. He noted that such uniform changes across multiple species from different biological kingdoms, plants, insects, bacteria, couldn't occur naturally overnight. Environmental stress might cause changes over several generations, but not with this speed or consistency. It was as if some force had temporarily reached into the genetic code of everything living in that field and made subtle improvements. More startling still was that these beneficial changes seemed to persist across generations. Seeds harvested from affected plants passed down the same advantageous traits, even to third-generation offspring grown entirely outside the original environment. This kind of inherited epigenetic shift is not unheard of, but its targeted nature, speed, and cross-species reach were unprecedented. In trying to understand the energy responsible for these effects, physicists proposed multiple possibilities. Some suggested the involvement of high-frequency electromagnetic fields capable of interacting with biological systems at a molecular level. Others speculated about unknown properties of the Earth's natural energy grid, or perhaps even a form of coherent energy that we haven't yet discovered. What united all these theories was the clear consensus that the energy involved behaved in a way that defied current understanding. It operated with a level of control, precision, and biological specificity that was far beyond anything science has yet achieved. As researchers continued their investigations, they were careful not to jump to conclusions. The evidence pointed to something real, measurable, and impactful, but the source remained elusive. Whether it was an undiscovered natural phenomenon, a new kind of energy, or something entirely different, the scientific anomalies left in the wake of the Wiltshire event raised fundamental questions about the forces that operate in our world, and how little we may still know about them. As researchers expanded their investigations into the Wiltshire Formation, attention turned toward the broader scientific implications of what had been recorded. While the biological changes and electromagnetic anomalies were baffling on their own, the event revealed deeper layers when scientists began to study the geometric design of the formation itself. Mathematical, acoustic, and even archaeological dimensions emerged, each more complex than expected. The physical pattern etched into the barley was not simply a visual symbol. It appeared to encode information at multiple levels of scientific analysis. Mathematicians began by analyzing the ratios, shapes, and alignments within the formation. At first, they noted basic geometry, perfect circles, equidistant lines, and symmetrical arcs. But with more scrutiny, subtler patterns emerged. The spacing between elements within the formation reflected ratios tied to musical harmonics, such as 2-3 and 3-5, relationships found in tuning systems used in classical music. These ratios weren't random. They were embedded with precision and mirrored those used in ancient architectural structures designed for acoustic resonance. This suggested the pattern was not only visually balanced, but also mathematically and acoustically harmonious. Further mathematical exploration revealed that the design included known constants such as pi, the golden ratio, and even Euler's identity, e to the power of equal plus 1 equals 0. These are not decorative formulas. They are considered fundamental truths in mathematics, and their inclusion implied a deeper intelligence behind the design. Portions of the formation appeared to reflect fractal geometry, patterns that repeat at different scales, much like those seen in snowflakes, ferns, and galaxies. Using software to examine the formation at different resolutions, researchers identified self-repeating shapes and scaling ratios, confirming that the design was more than ornamental. Drew Sophia Chen, a mathematician who spent weeks analyzing the geometry, concluded that the pattern worked on multiple mathematical levels simultaneously. She described it as a mathematical structure that balanced elegance with informational density. What surprised her most was the fact that the design functioned as a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional concept. When mapped using modeling software, the formation produced a structure that resembled orbital systems, similar to our solar system, but with notable deviations. Astronomers later identified these deviations as closely matching the known configuration of a star system located approximately 40 light-years away. The idea that the pattern could be a star map or orbital diagram wasn't taken lightly. Researchers superimposed the layout onto topographic maps and found that the formation aligned with existing subsurface electromagnetic anomalies documented in previous geological surveys. These were not casual overlaps. The pattern precisely corresponded with fault lines and underground water channels, suggesting that whoever, or whatever, created the formation may have used the natural features of the landscape as part of the design's construction. In other words, the formation wasn't just a message or artwork placed arbitrarily on a random patch of land. It interacted with the land itself. The alignment didn't stop at geological features. When oriented correctly to true astronomical north, certain lines within the pattern pointed directly toward significant star systems. The central axis aligned with Sirius, a star with deep symbolic meaning in ancient cultures from Egypt to the Americas. Secondary lines pointed to the Pleiades star cluster, another celestial formation referenced repeatedly across civilizations. These alignments suggested that the formation may have been designed to communicate astronomical knowledge or mark a specific moment in celestial movement. The archaeological implications became impossible to ignore when an ancient pattern match was discovered. Emma Harrington, an archaeologist familiar with megalithic sites across Europe, noticed a striking similarity between the formation's central motif and carvings found on a 7,000-year-old dolmen in Brittany, France. This wasn't a vague resemblance. The spiral and geometric symbols carved into the stone matched the crop formation's pattern with a precision that exceeded chance. Statistical analysis showed the probability of coincidence to be astronomically low. These ancient carvings had long been considered decorative or symbolic, but the newfound match suggested they might be records of similar phenomena witnessed by prehistoric cultures. This discovery led researchers to revisit ancient texts and archaeological artifacts with fresh eyes. Elements of the Wiltshire Formation appeared in ancient Sumerian tablets, describing celestial events and strange interactions between the heavens and earth. Aboriginal rock art in Australia featured concentric patterns and wave-like spirals that mirrored portions of the crop design. Sanskrit texts from India referenced a cosmic blueprint composed of sound and light, with visual descriptions that aligned closely with the formation's shape. Mayan glyphs also featured similarities, particularly in their representations of time cycles and cosmic rhythms. Cultural anthropologist Dr. Rebecca Williams, who had spent her career analyzing the common threads between ancient civilizations, believed these findings pointed to a shared symbolic language, one rooted in geometry, astronomy, and resonance. According to her, the Wiltshire Formation didn't invent these symbols, it revived them. This led to a provocative question. Were ancient cultures recording a phenomenon similar to what happened in Wiltshire? And, if so, had this interaction between the land, the sky, and an unknown force been occurring for millennia? Further connections were drawn to the Antakarana, an ancient Tibetan symbol believed to be associated with healing and consciousness. Elements of this symbol, particularly its overlapping lines and concentric design, were unmistakably present in the crop formation. Researchers concluded that the presence of such a variety of sacred symbols from unrelated cultures pointed to a unifying principle. possibly an energy or intelligence that had engaged with humanity across time and geography. The scientific team also noticed a statistical pattern in the proximity of crop formations to ancient sites. Nearly half of all crop formations in the United Kingdom over the past 3 decades had appeared within 15 kilometers of Neolithic monuments like Avebury, Stonebury Hill, and Stonehenge. Some researchers theorized that these locations were not randomly selected by ancient people, but were energetic hotspots, places where natural electromagnetic fields were particularly strong or stable. The repeated appearance of crop formations near these same sites could suggest a relationship between the two. Archaeoastronomers took these theories a step further. When analyzing the orientation of the Wiltshire Formation and its relationship to star positions at the time of the event, they found alignments that matched ancient star maps. The formation's central ring, when viewed from a drone at its highest point, pointed directly to the position of Sirius in the sky during the time of the event. Other points aligned with Orion's belt and the Pleiades. These star systems were not only revered by many ancient cultures, but they also featured prominently in myths about communication with the divine or otherworldly beings. The cross-disciplinary approach taken by researchers, blending archaeology, mathematics, geology, and astronomy, yielded a growing consensus. The Wiltshire Formation wasn't just a pattern in a field. It appeared to be a multi-layered structure with encoded information that resonated across scientific and cultural domains. It used geometry to express ideas, but those ideas were far from abstract. They seemed tied to biological enhancement, electromagnetic interaction, ancient symbolism, and possibly even interstellar communication. What intrigued scientists further was the non-human optimization of the design. When MIT researchers fed the pattern into generative AI systems trained on millions of mathematical forms and geometries, the AI failed to recreate it. The system could produce close approximations, but never the full design. The pattern followed principles that defied standard algorithmic logic, as though it had been created using a design language unfamiliar to both human and machine learning systems. One computer scientist described it as a mathematical poem, a creation that made sense only when viewed through multiple perspectives, both analytical and artistic. Software tools designed to detect hidden data patterns within visual structures were then used on the design. What they revealed was unexpected. By layering specific mathematical grids over the formation, researchers found that certain shapes, aligned to ratios used in quantum field theory, when these sections were rendered three-dimensionally, they resembled fields of force distribution similar to those theorized in advanced physics, particularly in speculative models of zero-point energy and quantum resonance. Even more intriguing was a discovery made using 3D rendering software. When the crop formation was interpreted as a flattened model of a spatial diagram, it produced an orbital structure that didn't match our solar system, but was similar in shape and gravitational arrangement to one discovered in 2016 by astronomers studying exoplanets 40 light-years from Earth. Though the probability of this being a coincidence was debated, it nevertheless added another layer of mystery to the formation's origin and potential meaning. Whether one viewed the formation as a message, a scientific demonstration, or a byproduct of an unknown energy phenomenon, its complexity continued to grow the more it was studied. The geometric design spoke across disciplines, communicating ideas that resonated with physics, biology, astronomy, and human history alike. The deeper researchers looked, the more they found connections not just to modern science, but to an ancient legacy of knowledge that may have long preceded our own understanding. What had initially appeared to be a strange event in a field of barley was now being recognized as one of the most intricately layered scientific puzzles of the modern era. One that didn't just ask how, but also why. As scientists, researchers, and analysts continued to explore the implications of the Wiltshire crop formation, a final dimension of the phenomenon demanded attention: the physical evidence left behind in the field. Unlike earlier crop formations that were often dismissed due to the lack of consistent physical data, this event delivered an unprecedented level of measurable, tangible anomalies, from altered plant structures and soil composition to microscopic metallic particles and synthetic compounds. The physical aftermath of the event offered clues and raised new questions about the mechanisms and intentions behind what had taken place. One of the most significant areas of study involved the plants themselves. Researchers from Cambridge University and ETH Zurich conducted extensive laboratory analysis on hundreds of barley stalks collected both inside and outside the formation. The first observation was the bending of the stalks. Unlike damage typically caused by mechanical force, where plants are crushed, broken, or snapped, the stalks in this case were uniformly bent at nearly perfect 90-degree angles, about an inch above the soil. Even more curious was that the plants were not damaged. The nodes, or knuckle-like joints of the stalks, had been expanded and elongated in a way that suggested internal heating rather than external force. Microscopic examination revealed alterations in the cellular structure of the stalks. In particular, the lignin, the tough, fibrous component that gives plants their rigidity, appeared softened or restructured. One hypothesis, proposed by plant biologist Drar Leslie Keene, suggested that the plants had been rapidly exposed to microwave-level energy. This would have caused a brief internal heating, making them flexible just long enough to be shaped, after which they cooled and held their new position. The absence of burn marks and the preservation of the plant's viability ruled out traditional heat sources like fire or radiation. Whatever energy had been used, it was incredibly targeted and precise. Adding to the mystery, only the plants within the specific geometric pattern showed these changes. Stalks just centimeters outside the design perimeter were completely unaffected. This selective effect pointed toward a form of energy that could differentiate and act with intention, suggesting a delivery system far more advanced than anything currently in use in agricultural or industrial applications. The anomalies weren't limited to plants. Soil samples collected from within the formation revealed microscopic metallic spheres, 10 to 50 microns in diameter, composed almost entirely of pure iron. These spheres were highly magnetized and distributed in radial patterns from the center of the formation's circles. Material scientist Amelia Richardson noted that the sphere's distribution was too uniform to be natural and too specific to be the result of farming equipment. Furthermore, the purity of the iron and the spherical shape suggested they had been formed in a molten state, within a powerful magnetic field then cooled rapidly. This kind of process typically requires laboratory furnaces and magnetically controlled environments. Certainly not something that could be achieved in a cold, open field in Wiltshire in the middle of winter. Further analysis of the soil revealed additional strange characteristics. X-ray diffraction showed changes in the crystalline structure of clay minerals in the affected areas. These structural changes required temperatures similar to those found in kilns, yet no surrounding plant life was scorched or harmed. Somehow the heating process had been applied with such finesse that only the soil components had undergone transformation, while leaving the organic matter untouched. The implication was a highly controlled form of energy application, again suggesting technological capabilities far beyond what is currently possible with known portable devices. A particularly strange discovery involved a fine white powder found lightly scattered across the entire formation. Laboratory testing identified the substance as 99.99% pure hydromagnesite, a mineral compound that does occur in nature, but never in such purity or distribution. The synthesis of hydromagnesite in laboratory conditions requires controlled environments, and high-pressure conditions, and its application across the field in such a uniform layer added to the growing list of inexplicable characteristics associated with the event. Mineralogists were left puzzled by how this compound could have been dispersed so delicately and uniformly without any evidence of an aerial spray or mechanical distribution method. Another area of study involved isotope analysis. Radiation specialists analyzing the soil found that the ratios of certain isotopes, such as those of carbon and nitrogen, had shifted slightly within the formation area. These shifts were consistent with exposure to a strong electromagnetic field. Similar to what might be observed in materials exposed to particle accelerators or intense energy bursts, the changes weren't dangerous in terms of radiation, but they suggested that the very atomic makeup of the soil had been temporarily altered. Again, this was not something that could happen naturally, nor could it be produced by current energy systems in a rural agricultural field. Perhaps even more baffling was the water collected from dew that had formed on plants within the formation. When viewed under high-powered microscopes, the molecular structure of the water showed unusual clustering. Instead of the normal chaotic arrangement of molecules, the water appeared to be structured, forming symmetrical patterns similar to those observed in laboratory experiments involving sound frequencies and vibrational energy. Researchers noted that this structured water retained its properties for weeks after collection, which defied expectations. Normally, water reverts to a random molecular state quickly once removed from its source. The suggestion here was that the energy field that had shaped the formation had also altered the physical properties of water itself. These physical observations were followed by the response from the scientific community. The event forced a reckoning within multiple disciplines. Botanists, physicists, geologists, and materials scientists, many of whom had previously dismissed crop circles outright, were now compelled to confront an event that could not be easily explained by conventional means. A group of physicists from MIT who reviewed the electromagnetic and thermal data concluded that the energy application used in the formation was similar to a focused microwave beam. However, they also noted that the level of precision and the lack of collateral damage made this explanation implausible, unless an unknown delivery system was involved. Some government defense analysts became involved, reviewing data quietly but with increasing interest. Their internal assessments reportedly concluded that no known military or aerospace technology could account for the formation. Satellite, drone, and aircraft surveillance had shown no unusual activity over the area during the time of the event. Radar logs were clean. This led some to speculate whether the phenomenon originated from a source operating in a manner entirely undetectable by existing systems, or from a technology that simply did not register on current detection platforms. Meanwhile, public and academic interests surged. The respected journal Nature took the rare step of dedicating a full issue to the Wiltshire phenomenon. Articles within the publication carefully avoided speculation but documented the evidence thoroughly. Peer-reviewed papers discussed everything from the plant anomalies and soil transformation to the electromagnetic disturbances and mathematical design. Even scientists who remained skeptical of any non-human explanation acknowledged that the quality of data collected from this single event was far beyond anything previously recorded in crop circle research. The incident also triggered collaboration across previously disconnected scientific domains. Botanists found themselves working alongside physicists, while computer scientists collaborated with archaeologists. Mathematicians joined forces with sound engineers and geologists. This interdisciplinary approach yielded new insights, as each field brought a unique perspective to an event that refused to fit neatly into a single category of explanation. The Wiltshire Formation was not simply an agricultural mystery or an atmospheric oddity. It was a convergence point where biology, physics, chemistry, geology, and ancient history all seemed to intersect. Among the various hypotheses that emerged, three dominant theories took shape. The first suggested a form of non-human intelligence attempting to communicate through geometry and energetic manipulation. Proponents of this theory pointed to the advanced mathematics, astronomical alignments, and encoded data as signs of deliberate intention. The second theory proposed that the Earth itself, possibly through mechanisms not yet understood, was generating these formations as part of a planetary self-regulation system. Supporters of this idea referenced the biological upgrades to plants and insects, as well as the formation's precise alignment with geomagnetic hotspots. A third group theorized that the event represented interaction with a form of consciousness native to the planet, neither alien nor human, but long misunderstood or unacknowledged by modern science. Other researchers leaned into the possibility that the formation demonstrated a form of sonic or acoustic engineering, the science of cymatics. The study of how sound waves create visible patterns in matter provided a potential explanation for how such geometric precision could be achieved through vibrational energy. Experiments in laboratories had already shown how increasing frequencies could produce increasingly complex patterns in sand, water, and other materials. The possibility that the Wiltshire Formation was essentially frozen sound geometry, embedded into the field like a physical recording of a vibration, gained traction in certain circles. A smaller but growing group of quantum physicists proposed a more radical interpretation. They suggested the event could have resulted from a temporary overlap between physical dimensions, where the laws of our known universe were briefly suspended, allowing another reality with different physical constants to interact with our own. This would explain the gravitational ping recorded at the moment of formation, the suspension of thermodynamic norms, and the electromagnetic anomalies that persisted long after the pattern had appeared. While debate continues about the origin and meaning of the Wiltshire Formation, what is clear is that the event has left a permanent mark on scientific discourse. The sheer volume of data, the range of disciplines involved, and the inexplicable nature of the evidence have elevated the phenomenon from fringe curiosity to legitimate subject of inquiry. Whether it is a message, a warning, a demonstration, or something else entirely, the formation has challenged assumptions and expanded the boundaries of what science is willing to explore. In the end, the Wiltshire Crop Formation stands as one of the most compelling, complex, and confounding events ever documented in the natural world. It is a reminder that there is still much we don't understand, not just about the universe, but about the hidden forces that may exist within our own world, waiting to be uncovered.